Carolyn Doobie here. What's the play for today? Today I'm gel printing a t-shirt, and I'm going to be using Gel Press's awareness ribbon plate. And of course you're going to see how to do it and you'll get all those tips and tricks, but you're also going to see the crime of t-shirt making that I commit, and you're also going to see an oops or two and what I do about it. So the first thing that I need to do is get my paint ready. And this beautiful rich deep magenta color here, that's not the one I wanted. What I wanted was a lighter pink. So what I'm going to do is simply mix some white paint in with it. And I'm going to do this right here on the 6x6 gel plate. Now if you think I've precisely thought out about how much white and how much magenta to use, well, nope, that's not what I did. I eyeballed it and I guessed. If the color was too dark, I'll just add more white. And if the color's too light, I'll simply add more magenta. In this case, it's a little too dark for what I wanted, so I'm just going to add a touch more white. Now the paint that I'm using is called Versatex, and it is screen printing inks for fabric and paper, and it's made by Jacquard. A little bit later in the video, I'll tell you exactly why this was the one I chose for today's project. Now that the paint's ready, we need to talk about the shirt. What I've got here is a white cotton t-shirt, and I've put a layer of freezer paper in here behind where I'm going to be doing the printing. If you don't have freezer paper, you can use something like wax paper or cardboard, whatever you've got on hand. You just want to put it wherever it is you're going to be doing the printing, and for me it's going to be in this area of the shirt so that it doesn't bleed through and get to the back side unintentionally. Well, now let's bring in the plate and the paint now that the shirt's all ready. There's plenty of paint on that brayer from when I was mixing the colors up, so I can just take the brayer and immediately put it right onto Gel Press's awareness ribbon here. I've got the color on there, and then I'm ready to get that first impression on the shirt. And I'm going to make it easy for myself. See, this is a V-neck shirt, so that tells me where the center of the shirt is. And then I'm going to place it right there in the center. But before I do that, I'm actually going to change something up a little bit, because the plastic backing was not on the plate as I was doing this, and I kept it off of there so that you wouldn't have the glare while I was filming, but I think we're going to deal with the glare because it makes it a lot easier to position this when it's on there. I put a lot more thought into the position of the first thing that I put on there because I'm going to use this to line everything else up after that. So I've put it right in the center, cheating with that little point on the V-neck. That's how I knew exactly where it was. And now I have the first piece of my pattern on there. I'm going to be alternating between ones with pattern and ones without, but there's a bunch of paint still on that ribbon, so what I'm going to do is just take a quick cleanup print. And that's just going to remove that extra paint that's on there, any of the paint that's still damp, so that I'm ready to put the pattern on there. Now that step is completely optional, and you'll see sometimes I do it and sometimes I don't. So now to get the pattern on here, I'm going to use a stencil. I've just put the stencil over the awareness ribbon and then brayered the paint right on top. Since I'm using a small stencil, this is ATC sized, I'm then going to just do a little bit on the bottom here so that I get the entire plate covered. Now I noticed that I got a little pink paint right in the middle there where I don't want it to show up in the print. So I'm going to take that ever fancy tool, the Q-tip, and I'm simply going to wipe away the wet paint. Now I'm going to be making a whole row of these going across, and lining it up is easy because you can see exactly where it's going to go down. So then you just put it where you want it and press that gel plate onto your fabric. I have a word of warning for people that are like me, that are paint magnets, when you're doing a white t-shirt. And that is, you gotta watch if there's paint on your fingers, if there's paint on the back sides of things, because it does show up on a white t-shirt. Now, if you're one of those people who, when they say go to an art workshop, like one of my friends did, she came to one of mine, and she had on a white shirt, she had come from work and didn't have an apron. She managed to make it through an entire gel printing workshop and not get a speck of paint on her clothes. I was wearing an apron, and I managed to get paint under the apron, around the apron, and on the apron too. But basically, I'm a paint magnet and she isn't. So for someone like her, doing this kind of project is just easy peasy and she doesn't have to think about it. For someone like me, I have to really make sure that I don't have a little bit of paint on my finger, that there isn't paint on the backside of something, those kinds of things, because, well, like what happened there, that little bit of pink, that was because there was something on my hand. Now it's over there to the right of the last one that I just printed, and you might be wondering what it is I'm going to do about it. Now the answer is nothing. I'm just going to leave it there. It might get covered up with the next one, it might not, but it's such a small little speck of pink, it's not going to stand out. And those things tend to happen in just about everything that I do, so I'm really comfortable with them. If it's the kind of thing that you're not comfortable with, just make sure that you really keep your hands clean and don't, say, dip your hand in some wet paint before you go and do this. And speaking of hands, it is because of my hand that this print came out with that little bit of an area around the middle where the paint's a little bit lighter. That's because of how I was pushing down on the plate. I'll show you when I put this next one down on here what I mean by that. So I'm going to do solid color here to continue with the pattern. And when I put it down, I want you to really notice where the actual hand is going. As I'm putting it on there, the part right around here, that's where there isn't as much pressure just because of the shape of my hand. So to fix that, if it bothers you, you simply take your fingers and press down in those areas that you might have a tendency to not push all the way. Now I was so focused on showing that to you, I missed that's that little bit of paint there that was in the center of the ribbon. If I'd cleaned it up with, say, a Q-tip, it wouldn't have transferred just that little bit there on the top of the print. But guess what? To me, it's the same thing as the other one. It's just this little speck. It's proof that it's handmade. It's wonderfully imperfect. And those kinds of things, I don't sweat those when I'm making a t-shirt like this. I mean, especially when I'm working on this much white, I'm just thrilled I don't have big spills of paint anywhere. But that's a me thing. You may not have that challenge. As I put the pattern here onto the awareness ribbon plate, I want you to see if you notice something that I'm doing with my hands. Well, it's really just one hand. One hand has the brayer, it's the other one. There's something that I'm doing with that stencil that makes it easy to get those patterns to line up. And that is, I'm not letting the very end of the stencil go flat. I'm just holding it up a little bit, and that will allow the stencil not to touch the pattern that was already on there from the first part of it. This stencil is from my ATC mix-up stencil from over at stencilgirlproducts.com. As I start here on the second row, you might notice that I'm not going right in the center to start with. Nope, this one's going to line up a little differently than the first row. What I'm going to do is make these kind of diagonal to the ones that were up above it. And getting the placement, again, is so easy because you can see exactly where it's going to go when you're putting that awareness ribbon plate down. The paint's starting to run out, so what I'm going to do is simply mix up some more. Just like what I did before, I'm going to mix it up right on there. I'm going to put some of the magenta on there and then some of the white. Now, will these colors perfectly match? Will this batch of pink be the exact same mathematically identical formula as what was on the first batch that I made here? I doubt it, but it will be close enough. And I can just adjust it by adding a little more magenta or more white, depending on how it looks once I've mixed the paint together. So why did I choose this Versatex paint to use on my gel press plate? Well, it's because I've recently moved and I'd actually forgotten that I had this stuff. It was in the back of a cupboard, and anything that's not right where I can see it, I tend to forget that I have. And yeah, my husband's kind of compared me to Dory from Finding Nemo a few times about this. But I decided this is a perfect place to play with this and try it out. And I have to say, I'm really happy with how this stuff worked. Not only did it work very well on the plate, it's also very soft and flexible when it's dry. So that makes it a perfect kind of thing to use for a t-shirt. And I have to say, it is screen printing ink that's for fabric, so it makes sense that it would work really well for this. This does need to be heat set if you want it to be washable. And on the back of the jar, they list 4 different ways that you can do it, so you have a lot of options for how to go about it. And there's something that people say you should do that I didn't do. When I made this shirt, I committed a t-shirt crime. At least that's how it feels compared to everything I've seen online. And that is, I didn't pre-wash this shirt. It was brand new and I just used it as it was to start gel printing on. Now, the conventional wisdom is you pre-wash it, you remove any sizing, you make it so the fibers can really take on that paint or that ink that you're using. And frankly, I'm too impatient to ever do that. So that was something that I don't do. Now, does that mean you should or shouldn't? Well, that's your choice. I just know for me, I never ever pre-wash any of the shirts that I play on. And by the way, what does it look like now that it's all finished and dry? Here is the complete shirt. This is just one of the things that you can do with a gel press plate. If you want more ideas, if you want more inspiration, subscribe to the Gel Press YouTube channel and check out all the wonderful tutorials that are there for you. Well, thanks so much for joining me for today's play, and thanks so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.